Before the stone walls and before the gunpowder and flags, there were only islands. Dozens of them, scattered like stepping stones across the Gulf of Finland. Low, windswept, and silent.
Welcome to the timeline of Suomenlinna. In this video I mentioned a number of military conflicts, but I explained them in another video. So in order to understand the timeline of Suomenlinna, it's a good idea to watch the timeline of Helsinki as well, just to get the full picture of Finnish politics and history. No niin.
Off the coast of what is now Helsinki lies a cluster of rocky outcrops, granite and gneiss forged by the ancient ice and sculpted by the sea and the storms. The archipelago, known today as Suomenlinna, is made up of 8 main islands, bound together by bridges, causeways, and centuries of fortification. Economically speaking, these were never fertile lands. There are no tall trees here, no broad meadows, only lichen-covered stone, salty grass, and cold soil. But, as a natural barrier at the mouth of Helsinki's harbour, they held strategic value. It's the perfect place for control over the narrow sea lanes of the eastern Baltic. Long before the fortress, only fishermen came here, and maybe some pilots guiding merchant ships into Helsinki through the dangerous coastal waters, or even smugglers. But there had never been a permanent settlement.
That changed in the 18th century. For quite some time, the Swedish Empire had dominated the Baltic region, ruling over present-day Finland, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, and many more regions.
But after the Treaty of Nystad in 1721, which ended the Great Northern War, Sweden had lost nearly all of Karelia and Ingria to the Russian Tsar Peter the Great.
So with this Treaty of Nystad, the Russian Empire gained a toehold on the Baltic. The subsequent founding of St. Petersburg in Ingria signaled a new threat because it indicated that the Russian Empire had an imperial appetite for the areas to the west.
The Swedish crown, desperate to secure its eastern border, decided to upgrade its remaining strongholds in Finland. And so, in 1747, a plan was drawn to create a fortress of islands. And it had to become a naval base for the Baltic fleet. The plan was bold, expensive, and urgent. They would build not on land, but upon the sea itself. The fortress would not be constructed, it would be carved, bit by bit, stone by stone.
Construction began in 1748 on Suursisaari, Wolf Island. From there it would grow to envelop the neighbouring skerries, connected by causeways and fortified by casemates, directly carved out of the natural rock that was already there.
A fortress not built to conquer, but to hold, to buy time, and to send a message across the sea, this far and no further.
The name given was Sveavuori, Castle of the Swedes, but to the men who built it, the engineers, the labourers, the soldiers and, yes, the convicts, it was simply Viavuori, the Finnish name that stuck with locals.
Leading the effort was Augustin Ehrensvärd, a 30-year-old artillery officer and military architect from Sweden. There was more to him than met the eye, because he looked like a common aristocrat in a powdered wig. Yet, he proved to be a military visionary. He did not just want to build a fortress, he wanted to create a system that would live, breathe, and endure.
Unlike the towering castles of earlier centuries, Sveavuori was designed as a bastion fortress. It embraced a low profile and an angled geometry. It would blend in with the landscape, not dominate it.
Its walls were shaped to deflect cannon fire, and its guns were cleverly positioned to stop enemies approaching, with lethal precision. Over the years, it grew into a network of powder magazines, artillery batteries, dry docks, and garrisons. It spread across Solsisaari, Koostalmiekka, Iso Mustasaari, and beyond. A special feature was the Kungsporten, or King's Gate. Built between 1753 and 1754, the King's Gate was not necessarily a functional entrance to the fortress. It was more like a symbolic message in heavy granite, shaped by the hands of many skilled laborers. Its location was deliberate. The gate stands on the southeastern tip of the island of Kuninkaportti, marking the exact site where King Adolf Frederick of Sweden arrived by ship in 1752 to inspect the ongoing construction of the fortress. So the gate was constructed in his honor as a ceremonial entrance to the Gibraltar of the North. It still stands proudly today, and you can still read the original inscriptions.
It's a remarkable spot, and I thought that even mystical creatures dwell here, because I saw what I believed was a dwarf. But upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a random teenager wearing a silly hat.
Anyway, Ehrensvärd's own house stood on Solsisaari, overlooking the harbour. You can still visit this villa today because it is preserved as the Ehrensvärd Museum in the historical commandant's house.
And very impressive is his actual tomb, just outside in the courtyard.
Augustin Ehrensvärd died on the 4th of October in 1772, and he was temporarily buried in a church cemetery in Helsinki itself. But according to the wish of the Swedish king Gustav III, his coffin was moved to Sveaborg in 1783. The king then designed a proper tomb, topped with a luxurious granite slab and bronze ornaments. It was completed around 1805, and that's when Ehrensvärd finally received his monumental forever resting place.
At the turn from the 18th to the 19th century, Sveaborg had become more than a fortress. It had become the second largest urban center in Finland after Turku. In a sense, these islands off the coast of Helsinki had become more lively than Helsinki itself.
It had its own shipyards, shops, chapel, and gardens, and already over 6,000 people lived and worked here: soldiers, sailors, craftsmen, and their families. So the project was definitely up and running. Yet in 1808 its endurance was tested and shattered. The Finnish War erupted, which was part of the larger Napoleonic Wars that reshaped Europe.
Russia was an ally of Napoleon at the time, and so it invaded Finland. Their goal was to defeat and drive away the Swedes, thereby securing their control over the Gulf of Finland. And, you guessed it, Sveaborg held the key.
The Russians laid siege to the fortress, and Admiral Karl Olof Kronstedt had to make a decision. Sveaborg was strong and well defended, but still, Kronstedt estimated the threat to civilians and the foreseen lack of reinforcements too great to overcome.
He surrendered the fortress on May 3rd, 1808, after only 2 months.
To some, Kronstedt was a pragmatist. To others, a traitor. But everyone knew the fall of Sveaborg sealed Finland's fate. Sweden lost the war. In 1809, it ceded all of Finland to Russia. 600 years of Swedish rule over Finland now ended. When Kronstedt signed the document, Sveaborg became a Russian fortress. Finland itself became an autonomous Grand Duchy under the Russian Tsar. Under Russian rule, Sveaborg was modernized. Orthodox chapels were added, and so were red brick barracks and some new coastal batteries.
In 1855, during the Crimean War, British and French fleets attacked Sveaborg. For 2 days the guns thundered, but the fortress held. It was damaged but not broken. And after that, silence again.
Sveaborg became a quiet outpost in the western corner of the Russian Empire. Soldiers were still stationed on the islands, but at the same time, families lived calm and simple lives here. The walls of the fortress slowly aged.
Yet underneath something stirred. I'm talking about problems for the Russian Tsar. Domestic issues that grew into huge problems as time went by.
In 1917, the Russian Empire experienced far-reaching revolutions. Amidst the chaos, Finland declared itself independent. And with that, Sveaborg was claimed by the newborn Finnish Republic. Its name was changed to Suomenlinna, the fortress of Finland. But the new nation was deeply divided, and soon after, civil war erupted between the Reds and the Whites. The Reds were mainly the working class people and the socialists. They sought radical social reforms inspired by the Russian Revolution and wanted to create a socialist Finnish state. Opposing them were the Whites, consisting largely of conservatives, landowners, and the middle classes, who wished to preserve order and build a stable, independent Finland. The conflict lasted from January 1918 to May 1918. The Reds controlled key cities, but lacked the military organization and external support that the Whites received. And so the Whites gradually pushed back the Reds, and by May the war ended with a White victory. Suomenlinna was now used as a prison camp, where thousands of captured Red Guard fighters and suspected sympathizers were held in dire conditions. The fortress that was meant to protect now held its own people behind bars. Disease and starvation followed, and it lasted for roughly a year. Combined with forced labor, the result was that around 1,100 prisoners died in these months. During World War II, Suomenlinna served again. It was repaired and manned and supplied.
And that's how the fortress helped to protect the capital. The Finnish Navy used it for training and as a logistical support base, and it was also part of the larger Helsinki air defense system.
In spite of these preparations, Suomenlinna did not see direct combat during the war, which is a good thing, of course. In fact, it gradually transitioned to a civilian and cultural site, rather than a military one, and in 1973 it was handed over from the military to the civilian administration. The only clear remnant of World War II at Suomenlinna is the submarine Vesico.
During the Continuation War, Vesico operated from Suomenlinna, conducting patrol and convoy duties in the Gulf of Finland.
It attacked the Soviet cargo ship Vyborg in July 1941, making the ship sink. And although the Vyborg was not necessarily a high-value target, sinking it boosted the Finnish morale, because it demonstrated that Finland's small submarine fleet was operational and effective. It's also the only remaining Finnish submarine from World War II. And what's more, you can visit it today. During the summer months, it serves as a museum and you can go in. Unless you're claustrophobic, of course. The submarine is not the only museum. As Suomenlinna's military role faded, its cultural purpose became ever more obvious. As of today, you can visit the Suomenlinna Museum and the Military Museum all year round. And in the summer, the Toy Museum, the Customs Museum and the Ehrensvärd Museum open their doors as well. In addition, there are some galleries and workshops on the islands where you can appreciate and buy ceramics, glass, wooden objects and textiles.
Lastly, there's a number of restaurants and cafes on Suomenlinna, so you won't ever go hungry. The shops and crafts, of course, highlight the fact that civilians have long lived and worked here.
In today's peaceful times, you can do peaceful things here, such as sending postcards to your family. I thought that was kind of bucket list worthy. Today, visitors and residents alike enter the island through the pink entrance building, because this is where the ferry docks. You cannot reach Suomenlinna in any other way, but in the past there was an ice road to the mainland instead. Before the establishment of the year-round ferry service in 1952, the ferry was unable to operate in winter. Until then, residents, visitors and the military used the ice road during the coldest months. This meant that you could walk to the fortress and the ice road could even carry vehicles. Now, is that safe? Well, the sea ice was thick. It could be up to 40 centimeters in Helsinki winters, and yes, that allowed for safe crossings. But from 1952, after the ferry system was modernized, the sea ice was destroyed on purpose, so an ice road was no longer possible.
But, to let you in on a little secret, there's still a tunnel between Helsinki city and Suomenlinna that the ambulance and maintenance services use. So, no worries about health or safety. It's not Alcatraz.
And just in case you forgot you were on a fortress island, there are many elements to remind you of that. For example, the decommissioned cannons. They are everywhere and they date back to both the Swedish and the Russian periods. Or what about these repurposed ship cannons from the 18th century? They are placed around the church and they are connected by chains. Interesting decoration, to say the least. The church itself was built in 1854 during the Russian period. It was constructed as an Eastern Orthodox garrison church and it was designed by Carl Ludwig Engel, the same architect who gave Helsinki its grand white cathedral. In 1929 it was rededicated as a Finnish Lutheran church. As of 2025 it is still in use and the tower also functions as a lighthouse.
The only one in Finland still guiding ships with, well, sacred purpose. And I think that truly fits these remarkable islands.
Sveaborg, Suomenlinna, fortress of empire, exile and nationhood. It has changed hands, changed names and changed meanings. It's not a ruin, nor a static museum. It's a living archive of everything Finland has been through.